You didn't find this video found you. And if that sentence made something in you pause, even for a fraction of a second, then you already understand more about what's coming than you realize. Most people spend their entire lives being moved by forces they cannot name, pulled by invisible currents, pushed by pressures they attribute to luck, to circumstance, to other people, to God, to chance. They drift, they react, they suffer, and they never once suspect that beneath the surface of everything they can see and touch, there is a living architecture, a set of laws so precise, so ancient, and so ruthlessly consistent that once you see them, you cannot unsee them. What you are about to encounter is not information, it is a remembering, and by the time this ends, you will never look at your life the same way again. Act 1. The hidden origin. What Hermes actually was before there were religions organized into hierarchies, before science had a name, before philosophy had schools and lecture halls. There was a single current of wisdom moving through the ancient world like an underground river. It didn't announce itself. It didn't seek crowds. It found individuals, specific people, at specific moments, and it changed them at a level that cannot be undone. That current had a name, Hermetic wisdom. And it was attributed to a figure so mythologically dense, so layered across cultures and centuries, that historians still argue about whether he was a man, a symbol, or something in between. Hermes Trismegistus. Thrice great. In Egypt, this figure appeared as Thoth, keeper of divine records, god of wisdom and the measurement of time, the one who weighed souls against a feather. In Greece, the same archetypal energy became Hermes, the messenger who moved between the world of the living and the world of the dead, the patron of hidden knowledge, the one who crossed boundaries that confined everyone else. When these two civilizations met and their mythologies fused, something extraordinary crystallized, a single teaching tradition that held within it the principles by which reality itself was organized. This was not religion in the sense we use that word today. It was not belief. It was not faith in the absence of evidence. It was a systematic investigation of how consciousness and matter relate, conducted in silence, in temples, by people who understood that the deepest truths cannot be handed to those who are not prepared to carry them. That is why the teachings were sealed, not from arrogance, from precision. A truth given to an unprepared mind doesn't enlighten, it distorts. It becomes dogma, superstition, misuse. The Hermetic tradition understood this and built its entire method around readiness. You received the teaching when you had developed the interior capacity to understand it without deforming it. This is where the word Hermetic comes from, in its most literal sense. Sealed, airtight, protected. And this is the lineage that eventually produced the book that carried these principles into the modern world, written in 1908, authored anonymously by 3 individuals who signed themselves simply as the 3 initiates. They did not seek recognition, they sought transmission. The Kybalion, not a new book, a vessel for something ancient, the same energy that was carved into stone in temples thousands of years before print existed. The same wisdom that survived the burning of Alexandria because it had already been memorized, embedded in ritual, preserved in oral lineages that moved like water through cracks in history. It found its way to you. That is not metaphor. That is the law operating exactly as it always has. Act 2, the first principle. The universe is thinking here is where most people's minds resist what they are about to hear. Not because it is difficult, because it is too large. The first and foundational principle of Hermetic philosophy is this. Everything that exists, every planet, every particle, every emotion, every memory, every dream you have ever had, is a thought occurring within a consciousness so vast it has no edges. The Kybalion states it in 3 words, all is mind. This is not a metaphor. It is not poetic language designed to evoke a feeling. For the Hermetists, it was a literal description of the structure of reality. The universe is not a machine that produces consciousness as a side effect. Consciousness is the substance from which the universe is made. Matter is not the ground floor of existence. It is one of consciousness's slower moving expressions. When vibration drops to its most condensed, most inert state, we call the result physical matter. When it rises, we call it energy. Higher still, light. And at the apex, a frequency so refined it can only be described as the originating mind itself. The ancient Hindus had a term for this primordial consciousness, Mahatma, the great soul, the cosmic mind behind all individual minds. The Gnostics called it the pleroma, the fullness. The Hermetists simply called it the all. What you are is not separate from that all. You are a localized expression of it, the way a wave is not separate from the ocean, but is the ocean doing something specific in a specific place. This has an immediate and practical consequence that most people never consider. If all is mind, if the universe is a living thought, then the quality of your own thinking is not a personal matter. It is a cosmological one. Your dominant mental patterns, your chronic emotional states, your deeply held beliefs about what is possible for you, these are not private. They are active forces in a universe that responds to mental frequency. This is why ancient teachers across wildly different traditions arrived at the same instruction through completely different languages. Watch your mind. Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is within." Buddha located the source of all suffering in mental patterns. The Stoics made the governance of inner perception the entire foundation of their philosophy. None of them were speaking metaphorically. They were describing the mechanics of a universe built from consciousness. Modern quantum physics has begun to approach this from an unexpected direction. The observer effect, one of the most replicated and least understood results in particle physics, demonstrates that the act of observation changes the behavior of matter at the subatomic level. The particle does not decide what it is until it is looked at. Consciousness is not a passive witness to physical reality. It participates in shaping it. The Hermetists knew this. They built an entire practical system around it. Because if the universe is mind, and if you are a concentrated expression of that mind, then your reality is not something happening to you. It is something happening through you, and the question is only whether you are participating consciously or unconsciously. Here is something that will change the way you relate to your worst periods. The universe moves in waves, always, without exception, without ceasing. The law of rhythm, one of the 7 Hermetic principles, states that everything in existence oscillates between poles. The tide comes in, it goes out. The sun rises, it sets. Economies expand, they contract. Emotions peak, they descend. Energy floods through you, it withdraws and replenishes. Nothing holds a peak position indefinitely. Nothing holds a valley position indefinitely either. This law is not cruel, it is merciful. But it feels cruel when you don't understand it, because when you are in a low cycle, every instinct tells you that something has gone wrong, that you have failed, that the momentum you had built is being dismantled, that you have somehow moved backward. You haven't moved backward, you have moved inward. Plato described the evolution of the soul not as a straight line progressing toward a destination, but as a spiral, a shape that returns to the same angular positions again and again, but from an ever-increasing elevation. When you revisit a familiar pain from a new level of development, it does not mean you failed to resolve it before. It means you have grown enough to see a deeper layer of it that was invisible to you the last time you were there. This is what genuine transformation actually looks like from the inside. It does not feel like steady upward progress. It feels like circling. It feels like returning. It feels, sometimes, like going backward into darkness you thought you had left behind. But you are not returning to the same place. You are passing over the same longitude from a greater altitude. What once floored you now barely grazes you. What once required a month of recovery now resolves in days. What once felt like catastrophe now registers as information. This is the spiral. This is rhythm understood. The practical implication is this. Stop treating your low cycles as evidence against your progress. They are not evidence against anything. They are the breathing pattern of a universe that does not hold its breath. When energy withdraws, the wise response is not panic, it is preparation. The inward phase is for integration, for stillness, for the kind of deep processing that is impossible during expansion. When you stop fighting the tide, you can use it. Everything you have ever called an opposite is actually the same thing vibrating at a different intensity. This is the law of polarity, and it is one of the most practically useful discoveries in the Hermetic system. Cold and heat are not two different phenomena. They are two positions on the same continuum of temperature. You do not eliminate cold by fighting it. You raise the temperature. The cold does not disappear, it transforms. The same substance, the same phenomenon, simply vibrating at a higher frequency. The same principle applies to every interior state you have ever tried to eliminate in yourself. Fear and courage are not opposites. They are the same energy, one contracted, one expanded. You do not overcome fear by destroying it. You transmute it by raising its frequency, by moving it along the same continuum, from the contracted end toward the open end. The energy is preserved, its form changes. Anger and transformative action share the same root. Grief and depth of love are inseparable. Obsession and devoted focus live on the same spectrum. What determines whether these energies serve you or imprison you is not their nature, but their degree, their direction, and above all, whether you are applying conscious intention to their movement. This is what the ancient alchemists were actually attempting to describe when they spoke of turning lead into gold. The lead and the gold were not two different substances. They were metaphors for two vibrational states of the same interior material, the dense, heavy, unconscious patterns of the unexamined mind, and the refined, luminous, liberated expressions of the same energy once consciousness had worked on it. True alchemy has always been interior work. You do not become someone else by eliminating what you are. You raise what you are. You refine it. You bring conscious awareness to the substance of your own inner life and work it the way a skilled craftsman works raw material, not by discarding what is difficult, but by understanding it deeply enough to transform it. The Hermetic tradition calls this transmutation, and it is available to anyone willing to stop fighting their inner states and start working with them deliberately. The law that never rests nothing in your life arrived without being planted. This is not consolation, and it is not accusation. It is the law of cause and effect, and it operates with a mathematical consistency that has no interest in your awareness of it. Every thought you have held persistently, every emotional state you have maintained as a default, every decision you made from fear, from clarity, from love, from resentment, every conversation you chose to have, and every one you chose to avoid, every habit you reinforced or disrupted, every belief you accepted without examination, all of it planted something. All of it is, right now, in various stages of germination and harvest. The mistake most people make is looking only at their actions when they examine cause. But the Kybalion points to a deeper level. Thought is cause. Emotion is cause. The vibrational state you maintain as your baseline, the frequency at which you habitually operate, is a cause broadcasting constantly, drawing experiences into your life that match its signal. This is not punishment, it is physics applied to consciousness. A gardener does not blame the soil when a seed he forgot he planted appears as a weed 3 seasons later. He remembers that he is living in a world where seeds always answer, and having remembered this, he becomes very deliberate about what he plants. That is the invitation of this principle, not guilt about the garden as it currently stands, but radical intentionality about what goes into the ground from this moment forward. You cannot unplant what has already been sown, but you can begin sowing something different today. And you can do so with the understanding that the law works in both directions, just as unconscious seeds have produced unconscious harvests, Conscious seeds planted with clear intention produce corresponding results. The interval between planting and harvest varies. Some seeds answer in days, some take years, some you will have forgotten planting by the time they appear. This is why patience is not a virtue in the ordinary sense. It is a strategic necessity for anyone working consciously with this law. Plant differently. Wait with understanding. Watch what emerges. Act 6. Correspondence. The universe AS mirror there is a sentence so compact and so complete that it was carved into the Emerald Tablet, the oldest known Hermetic text, and has been transmitted without interruption for thousands of years. As above, so below. As within, so without. The law of correspondence states that every level of reality mirrors every other level. The macrocosm is reflected in the microcosm. The structure of a galaxy mirrors the structure of an atom. The pattern of your inner emotional life is mirrored in the pattern of your outer circumstances. This is not poetry, it is a navigational tool. When your outer world is confusing, chaotic, or stuck, the law of correspondence says, look within. What mirrors this confusion inside you? What belief system is producing this pattern? What emotional state has become so habitual it is now broadcasting as environmental reality? And conversely, when you bring order, clarity, and coherence to your interior world, your exterior circumstances begin, with a reliability that eventually stops surprising you, to reorganize in correspondence. This is why every genuine wisdom tradition begins with self-examination rather than environmental manipulation. Not because the outer world doesn't matter, but because the outer world is a reflection. You don't fix a reflection by painting on the mirror. You change what stands before it. The practical application is disarmingly simple. Treat the state of any area of your external life as a message from your unconscious interior. Your finances, your relationships, your health, the quality of your daily environment, none of these are happening to you from outside. They are corresponding to something within you that you may or may not have examined. Examine it. This is the beginning of real power. Here is what becomes visible once you have spent enough time with these principles. They are not 7 separate laws. They are 7 facets of a single law. Mentalism tells you the substance of reality, consciousness, mind, thought. Correspondence tells you its structure. What happens at one level is reflected at all others. Vibration tells you its nature. Nothing rests. Everything moves. Everything expresses itself as frequency. Polarity tells you its range. Every phenomenon has 2 poles, and transmutation is movement along the spectrum between them. Rhythm tells you its timing. Everything cycles, everything oscillates, the universe breathes. Cause and effect tells you its accountability. Every output is traceable to an input. Nothing is exempt. And gender, the final principle, tells you its creative dynamic. All generation requires both the active and the receptive, the initiating impulse and the gestating space. Strip away the different names, the different emphases, the different entry points, and you find the same truth moving through all 7. The universe is a living mind, organized in perfect correspondence across all its levels, vibrating across a full spectrum of frequency, cycling through time with absolute consistency, responding to every cause without exception, creating through the interplay of complementary forces. You are inside this system. You are made of this system. And you have, whether you knew it or not, been participating in this system every moment of your existence. The only thing that changes when you study the Kybalion is this: you stop participating unconsciously. Act 8. The living purpose. Why your goals keep changing there is something the Hermetic path eventually reveals that nothing in conventional goal-setting culture prepares you for. Your purpose is not a destination, it is a direction. Most people construct a vision of what they want: a career, a relationship, a level of financial security, a specific creative achievement, and treat that vision as the measure of their success. If they reach it, they succeeded. If they don't, they failed. If they reach it and feel empty, something must be wrong with them. But the Hermetic understanding of purpose is entirely different. Your desires are not random. They are the specific frequency of your consciousness at a given moment expressing itself as longing. When you change, when your consciousness develops, when your vibration refines, your desires change with it. Not because you were wrong before, because you are different now. The Kybalions' underlying teacher stated, "The path reveals the seeker." You do not need to know everything before you begin. You need only to begin. The movement itself generates the revelation. Each step taken in genuine alignment opens the next step, not because the universe is rewarding you, but because motion through aligned intention is how consciousness explores and expands itself. This means that the goals you abandoned were not failures, they were stages. Necessary elevations that carried you to the altitude from which the next thing became visible. You could not have seen what you can see now from where you were then. The old dream had to die so the new awareness could live. Stop grieving the goals you outgrew. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. They moved you. And if right now something new is beginning to stir, something subtle, something that doesn't yet have a name, something that feels simultaneously like longing and like terror, pay attention to it. That is the next ball appearing in the field. That is your consciousness, having done its work, showing you where it needs to go next. Act 9. Living the laws. Direct application, understanding these principles intellectually changes nothing. The Kybalion is explicit on this point. The initiate does not simply comprehend the laws. The initiate lives within them consciously, the way a skilled swimmer moves with the current rather than exhausting themselves against it. Here is how each principle translates into daily practice. Mentalism demands that you take your thought life seriously, not occasionally, as a constant discipline. What you think persistently becomes your vibrational signature. Begin each day by deliberately establishing the mental tone you intend to maintain. When you notice your inner dialogue drifting toward contraction, scarcity, or fear, interrupt it. Not by suppressing it, but by consciously redirecting it toward what is true and expansive. Correspondence asks you to use your outer world as a diagnostic instrument. Before you act on any external circumstance, ask, what does this reflect? What inner state is this mirroring back to me? Begin with your immediate environment, the state of your physical space, the quality of your body, the nature of your closest relationships. These are not accidental, they are correspondence. Vibration requires that you become intentional about what you allow into your frequency field, the content you consume, the conversations you participate in, the environments you inhabit. All of these influence your vibrational state. Raise your frequency through silence, through nature, through creative expression, through gratitude practices that are not performative but genuinely felt. Polarity teaches transmutation as a daily skill. When a difficult emotion arises, anger, fear, grief, resentment, do not fight it and do not indulge it. Work with it. Identify its position on the spectrum and ask what movement toward the higher pole would look like. Anger contains force. Where can that force become purposeful action? Fear contains awareness. What is it trying to protect? And how can that awareness become useful caution rather than paralysis? Rhythm asks for the radical acceptance of your cycles. On low energy days, do not punish yourself for the low. Honor it. Use it for the interior work that expansion phases make difficult. Avoid major decisions during valleys. Avoid overcommitting during peaks. Learn to read your own timing. Cause and effect demands that you audit your habits, not just behavioral habits, but mental and emotional ones. What are you planting every day in the field of your consciousness? What seeds are you sowing through your chronic emotional states, your default narratives, your unconscious reactions? Change what goes into the ground. The harvest will follow with absolute precision. Gender invites you to honor both the active and receptive dimensions of your own nature. Act when action is called for. Be still when stillness is required. Trust intuition as much as analysis. Allow ideas to gestate before forcing them into premature manifestation. The creative process requires both the impulse and the space, and most people destroy their own creations by refusing to honor the receptive phase. These are not practices you do once and complete. They are the ongoing curriculum of a conscious life. Closing, the seal is lifted for those who are ready. Here is the final truth the Kybalion points toward. You were not given this information. You arrived at the readiness for it. There is a difference. Information given to unreadiness produces confusion at best and harm at worst. But readiness arrived at through genuine development, through the kind of inner friction and growth that cannot be faked, creates the exact interior conditions in which this ancient wisdom can be received and used. The fact that you are here, following this thread, feeling the recognition that arises when truth meets the part of you that already knew, that is not coincidence. Coincidence is a word for a law we haven't recognized yet. The Hermetic tradition has no interest in making you dependent on it. Its entire purpose is to develop in you the capacity to navigate reality consciously, to move through the 7 laws as a swimmer moves through water rather than a log floating wherever the current decides. You are not a log. You never were. The current was never something happening to you. You are a concentrated point of the same consciousness that generates the current, and you have the capacity, through understanding and practice, to move within it with intention, with precision, and with the quiet authority of someone who finally knows what kind of universe they are living inside. That knowledge changes everything. Not because it gives you control, because it gives you alignment. An alignment in a universe governed by laws this consistent and this responsive is the closest thing to genuine power that a human being can possess. The Kybalion has found you. What you do with that is now entirely yours.